My fiancé demanded I sign over my $300,000 house to her parents. Or no wedding. Please stick with me as I tell you my story. It might sound unbelievable, but every word is true. I grew up with nothing handed to me. Every dollar I saved came from long hours, double shifts, and weekends where my friends were out having fun while I was grinding just to build a future. After years of sacrifice, I finally bought a house. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. 3 bedrooms, a yard that needed work, and a mortgage I had fought tooth and nail to pay down. To me, it wasn't just a house. It was proof that hard work pays off. When I met her, everything seemed to fall into place. She was beautiful, warm, the kind of woman who could light up a room without even trying. Our connection felt instant, and for the first time in years I let my guard down. She laughed at my dumb jokes, bragged about me to her friends, and seemed proud of the man I'd become. I thought I'd finally found the missing piece of my life. Looking back, there were signs I ignored. Little moments where she'd insist on her way, subtle digs about my frugality, and the way her parents always seemed just a little too involved in her choices. But I brushed those thoughts aside because love makes you blind. When we got engaged, I was over the moon. Planning the wedding was stressful, sure, but I was ready to do whatever it took to make her happy. Then came the moment that shattered everything. We were sitting at her parents' dining table, the 4 of us, going over wedding details. Out of nowhere, her mother slid a folder across the table. Inside was paperwork. Property transfer documents. My house. Her father spoke first, calm and direct, like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. If you truly love our daughter, you'll make sure her future is secure. Sign the deed over to us and then we can move forward. I laughed, thinking it had to be some twisted joke. But then I looked at her. My fiancée, the woman I thought I'd spend forever with. She wasn't laughing. Her eyes were hard, determined. If you want to marry me, she said, her voice steady, you'll sign it. Otherwise, there's no wedding. The silence after her words clung to the air, thick and suffocating. Her parents didn't fidget, didn't blink. They just sat there across the polished oak table as though their demand were no more unusual than asking me to pass the salt. Her father leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, his voice even and deliberate when he spoke again. This isn't about taking something from you. It's about protecting her future. Our daughter deserves stability, and the only way we can be certain is if the deed rests in our hands. His wife nodded, her smile thin and unyielding. You'll still live there, of course. Nothing changes except that you'll be showing her where your priorities lie. My chest tightened. I searched their faces, trying to find even a flicker of humor, something to tell me this was a sick test of character, but there was nothing. Their calmness felt rehearsed, like they'd been waiting for this moment. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay level. You really don't trust me enough to build a life with your daughter without demanding ownership of the one thing I worked my whole life for? You think this is love? My eyes darted to her, hoping she'd break the spell, laugh it off, maybe scold her parents for pushing boundaries. Instead, she folded her arms and leaned closer to me, her expression unflinching. Love means sacrifice. If you're unwilling to make one for me, what does that say? Her words hit like a blade. My mind scrambled, torn between disbelief and anger. I wanted to remind her of the nights I'd gone without sleep, the debts I'd fought to bury, the sweat that built the very roof she wanted me to hand away. Instead, all I could manage was, why does proving I love you mean giving up everything I earned? No one answered. They didn't need to. Their silence carried the weight of expectation. My heart pounded as the walls of the dining room seemed to close in, trapping me in a choice I never imagined I'd have to make. In front of me lay 2 paths. Surrender the home that symbolized my entire struggle, or refuse and risk losing the woman I thought was my future. Both felt like betrayal, and the decision gnawed at me until I could barely breathe. I still remember the first night I saw her. A crowded bar after work, music thumping, laughter spilling over the tables. She walked in with a few friends and the room seemed to bend toward her. I don't know if it was the way she carried herself or the ease in her smile, but I was hooked before I even spoke to her. We talked until closing, trading stories like we'd known each other forever. Within weeks we were inseparable, swept into something that felt too perfect to question. She called me her rock, and I told myself I'd found the woman I could finally build a future with. Back then, the tiny moments didn't register. The way she'd take my phone to scroll without asking. The irritated sigh whenever I hesitated to spend on things she wanted. How she would insist her opinion outweighed mine because she just knew better. They were small enough to dismiss, easy to excuse as quirks. I told myself every couple had little battles. Her parents, though, carried a different energy. Polished, polite, but behind their smiles there was always a weight, as if they were measuring me and finding something lacking. Dinners at their home felt less like family gatherings and more like interviews. Still, she was warm, playful, always quick to reach for my hand under the table, and that warmth made it easy to ignore the chill surrounding the people who raised her. Friends tried to nudge me awake. A buddy would joke, "She runs the show, doesn't she?" Another asked gently if I'd noticed how her parents always inserted themselves into our plans. I laughed it off every time, insisting they just didn't see the side of her I knew. The one who curled against me during storms, who texted good morning before my alarm went off, who made me believe we were building something real. But sitting at that dining table, staring at documents with my name printed in stark black ink, those memories twisted in my mind. None of it was spontaneous. The charm, the constant steering of our choices, the way her parents' presence loomed over everything, it had all been leading here. What I thought was sudden wasn't at all. The trap had been set long before I realized I'd walked straight into it. Her voice cut through the room sharper than any knife. "So that's it? You'd rather hold on to some walls and a roof than prove you care about me? You're picking bricks over your future wife." The words hit me like a slap. My chest burned, not from doubt but from the sheer audacity of what she was asking. I steadied myself, staring right back at her. "No," I said quietly, "I'm choosing honesty. If you loved me, you wouldn't demand I give up the one thing I worked my whole life for just to prove it." Her eyes narrowed, lips pressed tight as if she'd already rehearsed every argument. She launched into another tirade about sacrifice, about loyalty, about how real devotion means putting her above everything. I listened, but each word only pushed me further away. The woman I thought I knew wasn't standing in front of me anymore. What I saw now was entitlement wrapped in the mask of affection. I refused to budge, and in that refusal something inside her snapped. She yanked the ring from her finger, the small circle of gold flashing in the light before she slammed it onto the table. "If you can't choose me," she hissed, "then you don't deserve me." The front door rattled as she stormed out, the echo of her heels fading into the night. I stood there frozen, staring at the abandoned ring glinting against the wood. For a long moment pain swallowed me whole. My chest felt hollow, like the future I'd envisioned had just collapsed into dust. But beneath the ache was something else, something steadier. Relief. As much as it hurt, the fog had finally lifted. I could see her for who she truly was, and the clarity was almost liberating. That ring wasn't just a symbol of love anymore. It was evidence of a bargain I was never willing to make. I picked it up, closed my hand around it, and made the decision she thought she had power over. This wasn't going to be her choice. Before she had the chance to end things on her terms, I was already done. The wedding was finished, not because she left but because I refused to be bought. The next morning I made it final. I called the venue, canceled the reservations, and told both families there would be no ceremony. The words felt heavy leaving my mouth, but once spoken, a strange calm settled over me. That calm didn't last. Phones rang non-stop, relatives demanded explanations, and friends stared at me as though I'd set fire to my own future. When she heard the storm arrived, she showed up at my doorstep, eyes blazing, voice shaking with fury. "You destroyed everything we planned. Do you have any idea how much you embarrassed me?" Her accusations poured out in waves. How I was heartless, how I cared only about money, how no woman would ever put up with someone so selfish. She twisted every memory we shared into a weapon, swinging each one at me as if I'd robbed her of the life she deserved. Her parents followed soon after, knocking on my door with solemn faces and sharp words. Her father spoke first, measured but cutting. "Do you realize what you've done to our family? You've humiliated our daughter. After all she invested in you, this is how you repay her." Her mother added her own sting. "A real man doesn't humiliate the woman he claims to love. You could have avoided all this." I listened, silent, letting their accusations hang in the air. Every word tried to strip me of resolve, but the truth was carved too deep for me to be swayed. They weren't mourning love lost. They were mourning a failed transaction. I wasn't about to surrender my dignity to satisfy anyone's greed. Finally she stepped forward, her voice low but trembling with venom. "You'll regret this," she spat, her eyes fixed on me like daggers. "Men like you never find better. You'll die alone clinging to that empty house. She turned and stormed away, her parents trailing behind her. The door clicked shut, and for the first time in weeks the house felt like mine again. Not just brick and wood, but a shield I had refused to give away. Her vow echoed in my head, sharp and bitter, but beneath it, I felt an anchor drop inside me. I hadn't lost, I had protected what truly mattered. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet. At first, I thought the silence was mercy, a chance to breathe without her voice in my ear or her parents shadowing every decision. But whispers have a way of traveling, and soon enough pieces of the truth started reaching me. A friend pulled me aside one evening, hesitant as though unsure whether to speak. He finally admitted she had been boasting long before the engagement fell apart. Over drinks with her circle, she'd bragged that marrying me meant more than love. It meant securing property. She called it her safety net, speaking as if the house were already hers to claim. Hearing that cut deeper than I expected because it confirmed everything I hadn't wanted to believe. Then came the second blow. Another acquaintance mentioned seeing her around town with someone new, even while our engagement had still been intact. At first I didn't want to accept it, but the stories lined up too cleanly. She had been entertaining another man casually, as though I were simply a placeholder until she got exactly what she wanted. The betrayal stung in a way I can't put into neat words. I had convinced myself our bond was genuine, that the warmth she showed me had meaning. But piece by piece I saw it unravel for what it truly was: conditional. She didn't love me, she loved the security I represented, the comfort I provided, the future she thought she could claim without cost. Walking through my own front door one evening, I paused and looked around at the walls, the photographs, the quiet hum of the place I had built alone. For the first time I realized how close I had come to losing it all. Not just the house, but my freedom, my sense of worth, my very self. It wasn't luck that saved me, it was finally saying no. The pain was still there, heavy and raw, but beneath it lived something sharper, something steadier. I hadn't been abandoned, I had escaped. What I mistook for loss was, in truth, deliverance. And that realization, as bitter as it was, felt like the first breath after nearly drowning. Anger has a way of consuming a man if he lets it, and for a while I felt it simmering under my skin, begging for release. But lashing out would only drag me down to her level. So instead I chose patience. If her mask slipped on its own, all I needed to do was let people see it for what it was. One afternoon, fate handed me the first piece of that plan. I was leaving a hardware store when I spotted her with someone new. He looked younger, sharp suit, expensive watch, the kind of man who thought he had everything under control. They didn't notice me, but I noticed them. Especially the way she clung to his arm, her laughter practiced, her eyes scanning him the way she once had scanned me. Weeks later, by sheer coincidence, I ended up in conversation with the same man through a mutual connection. He spoke proudly about dating her, convinced he had found someone devoted. What struck me most was how familiar his words sounded, almost identical to the way I once described her. He mentioned she wanted him to consider buying property, to show he was serious. My stomach tightened. The playbook hadn't changed. I didn't confront him, I didn't need to. Instead, I let curiosity slip into the right ears. A quiet comment here, a casual observation there. Friends of friends carried whispers the way wildfire carries sparks. I never accused, never pointed fingers. I only asked questions that lingered long after the conversation ended. She ever talked to you about deeds? I'd ask with a shrug. Or, funny how quickly she moves, isn't it? Small seeds, harmless on the surface, but enough to make people start watching more closely. And soon, the pieces began stitching themselves together without my hand forcing them. Stories collided, details aligned, and her carefully polished image started to tarnish. The beauty of it was that I didn't have to lift more than a finger. Truth has a way of crawling out of shadows on its own. For the first time since the engagement crumbled, I felt in control. Not by revenge and flames, but by simply letting her own patterns expose her. It was only a matter of time before the mask slipped completely. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. The man she had latched onto began hearing the same whispers I had quietly helped set loose. At first he brushed them off, but eventually the stories grew too consistent to ignore. When he discovered just how rehearsed her games were, the illusion shattered. Their romance ended abruptly, leaving her without the safety net she had been so certain she'd secured. Her parents didn't escape untouched either. People began to talk, quietly at first, then louder as the truth made its rounds. Neighbors who once admired their polished manners now spoke of their calculating ways. At gatherings, their smiles looked tighter, forced, as if they knew the tide had turned against them. The image they had worked so hard to maintain was dissolving under the weight of gossip. Then one evening she appeared at my doorstep. The same woman who had once hurled accusations at me now stood in front of me with a soft voice and downcast eyes. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I let pressure get to me. I shouldn't have pushed you like that." Her words were carefully chosen, every syllable dripping with the sweetness I once found irresistible. She reached for my hand as though we could pick up where we left off, as though betrayal could be erased with a smile. I let her speak. I stood there, silent, letting her pour out every line she thought would win me back. Promises of change, confessions of regret, declarations that she finally understood what mattered. But as I listened, there was no tug at my heart, no urge to believe. I saw her clearly now. Every word was just another script, another attempt to secure what she thought she had lost. When she realized I wasn't moving, panic flickered in her eyes. She gripped my arm, her voice trembling now, stripped of its calm. "We can still fix this, can't we?" she pleaded, desperation leaking through every syllable. I looked at her, not with anger but with clarity, and for the first time since everything began, I felt untouchable. Her question lingered in the air, trembling with desperation, but I had no hesitation left inside me. I pulled my arm free and met her eyes with a calm she couldn't shake. "I won't sell my future for someone else's plan," I said evenly. "Not for you, not for your parents, not for anyone." The sweetness drained from her face in an instant. Her mask cracked and what spilled out was raw and ugly. "You think you're better than me?" she snapped, voice rising. "You're nothing without me. No one else will want a stubborn fool who clings to a pile of wood like its treasure." Every word dripped with venom, her tone no longer soft, no longer pleading, only bitter, entitled, furious. I let her rage wash over me without responding. For the first time her insults didn't pierce. They sounded hollow like echoes in an empty hall. What struck me most wasn't anger but sadness. Not for myself, I was standing in my own home, still whole, still free. The sadness was for her, for the person she could have been if greed hadn't clouded her every choice. She had traded love for control, and in the end she had nothing to show for it. When she realized her fury wasn't landing, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her one final time. The walls shook, then settled into silence. I stood there, breathing in the quiet, and felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. No more shouting, no more manipulation, no more weight pressing down on me. In the days that followed, I poured myself back into the life I'd been neglecting. Repairs on the house, evenings with friends, mornings that felt light instead of heavy. Slowly, I built something better than what I had lost. Not with someone else but within myself. Every now and then I'd glance at the front door and remember her vow, her anger, her desperation. But the truth spoke louder. I hadn't been defeated. I had kept my home, my dignity, and most importantly, my freedom. And in that quiet victory I found everything I truly needed. Months rolled by and life began to feel lighter. One afternoon at a coffee shop, I struck up a conversation with a woman waiting in line. There was no pretense in her smile, no agenda hiding behind her words. We talked easily, without pressure, and for the first time I felt what it was like to be seen without conditions. Spending time with her showed me the difference between affection built on sincerity and affection tied to gain. She laughed at simple things, asked about my day because she cared, not because she was calculating what she could take from me. That contrast was impossible to ignore. Not long after, I saw my former fiancée across a busy street. Alone, restless eyes scanning every passerby, she still wore the same hunger for wealth and validation. She hadn't changed, just grown lonelier, chasing a prize that kept slipping from her grasp. Watching her fade into the crowd, I felt no anger, no regret. Only clarity. In the end, losing her was the best gain of my life. What once felt like heartbreak had become liberation. Proof that betrayal can carve the path toward wisdom and freedom.